All right, so here we are at close project or phase, the last process. Now, I just want to mention this. Let me go back here to this slide. Process groups, groups of processes, right? Initiating, planning, executing, monitor, controlling, closing. There's only one process in this group. We used to have closed procurements in this process. So John, you'll note that that's no longer a process. That was removed. All right, what they did was they removed 3 processes and added 5. And so that's how we get an addition of 2. That's just for John. But because we no longer have multiple processes in this group, PMI still maintains that this is a process group because each company has their own specific processes for closing down projects. Right? And then many times within your company, within divisions, you guys may have, like Dana, Ryan, and Chris, you each may have different requirements for closing down your projects as they get to different stages, right, for the company. So I just want to give you that background because PMI may ask you that question. Okay. So in this process group, we're finalizing all the activities, finalizing everything. We're archiving documents. We're formally closing the project. That's that term from PMI, formally closing, and then we release folks. So our key outputs, final product, service, or result transition, right? Like transition into operations or into production. Okay. We get updates to our documents, specifically lessons learned, and then we'll get a final report. So notice the reports, John. We didn't used to have a quality report or a risk report or a project report. Now we have those now. Same thing, Maggie. Maggie, did you try version 5 and now you're going for version 6 or always version 6?
I have both.
Both, okay. All right, so make note of those changes because you've been studying for a long time one way and now, now we need these reports. Okay, so this is an integration management process that pulls together the planned work, the documents, and translate them into a final form. So let me go back. The glue of your project is the integration knowledge area. Develop a charter that has our goals, that has the business case. Why are we doing this in the first place? Develop a plan to meet those goals. Direct and manage a team according to the plan. Manage any additional knowledge that comes up as we go along and add it to the plan. Monitor and control the work to make sure that the plan that we're directing and managing the team according to the plan to achieve the goals. And then perform integrated change control so that the plan always reflects the latest knowledge, right? And attaches to the goals. And now we're going to close this project or phase. So we're going to accept all the deliverables that we've monitored and controlled and got accepted, how we directed the team according to the plan to achieve the goal. So I keep tying it back to you all because this is the glue of project management. These processes here are really PM heavy. So like as a PM, you're facilitating development of the charter. You're facilitating the development of a plan. You're directing and managing the team. You're monitoring, controlling work, and you're closing. You do a lot of this on your own. In the planning processes, we work with team members. You do a lot of this with team members, okay? Or I should say key stakeholders to collect their requirements and turn these into plans. But with team members too when you're estimating. And then here as a PM, you're doing this with the team too, but really you're just setting it in motion, okay? And then here is where we're constantly monitoring. We're living in this process group from the moment that we get the charter signed from the sponsor, and they're saying, hey, what's the budget? Do you have a project management plan yet? And you're like, relax, it's been 2 days. It's gonna take us 3 months to get this thing, right? You're monitoring, controlling their level of engagement and the amount of money that you've been spending just to build the plan all the way until you've satisfied the last deliverable. The sponsor or customer has validated scope, so they're done. You still have to monitor and control because you may have vendors that you have to go back and check their work. And although you've completed the project, they only did 87% of their work. And so you need to go back and get money back from them or whatever it may be. You're still monitoring, controlling, and then you close out the project at the end, which is usually why our closeouts are well beyond the delivery date. All right, so that's the idea from PMI, right? The slides, like what PMI gives us is minimal. but 7% of your exam will come from here, which means you're going to get 14 questions just from this one process. Okay, so just keep that in mind. Charter as an input here, because the goals should match the plan, and our final product, service, or result transition should match this goal. We'll take all the documents to date, the accepted deliverables themselves. Okay, that was way off. Accepted deliverables themselves. Okay, the business documents, the business case, the benefits management plan, the plan that says how we intend to realize and sustain the benefits of this project post-implementation, post-transition. Any contracts, procurement documentation, OPAs, we'll analyze the data, we'll have meetings, and then we'll get these outputs. And the output we're trying to get is that product, the service. Maybe we're upgrading an email server, right? We're just providing a service to our customers or the other employees of the organization. Or we're officially transitioning to the customer. Maybe we're transitioning into operations. Maybe we're transitioning into production. So you're going to get many different points of view on this, right? They got 14 opportunities to give you a different point of view of closing a project. Okay. We'll get our project documents, any lessons learned, and then a final project report. Do not ignore this output. It's key output, final project report. Okay. To get there, we'll take the charter, which had the success criteria, and the definition of done, or our acceptance criteria. All these project documents that may be pertinent. When you close a project, you don't always take all the documents, but whatever may be applicable at the moment, take it as an input. We definitely want to take the accepted deliverables, and in the case of the exam, or even in a practical application in life, it just may be the sign off or the collection of emails. It might not be the deliverables themselves, but something that said it was complete and it was accepted. All right, so there goes the delivery receipts. Any contracts that may be required to complete the project, and the other procurement documentation, we take all this as an input, along with the charter. Then we use our expert judgment. Other subject matter experts, ourselves, but really folks that know how to close a project down if it's not yourself. And then we'll analyze all the information, the lessons learned. We'll do regression analysis. Are you guys doing that? Okay, so regression analysis. And for PMI, you just need a lot of data, and it's just a way to look back. So for any of you that aren't doing regression analysis, you likely are, you just didn't know that you're doing it. Officially, it takes a ton of data points. And if you manipulate a data point, then it's almost like looking at an Excel spreadsheet that's all connected. And as you change the value in one, it updates the thousands of other cells. That would be like regression analysis. And it's if you think regress, when people regress, they go back to look back. Had we made a change at 20% of the way in and went with plan X as opposed to plan Y, now what would the project look like, right? So that's your regression analysis. You look at trend analysis, you look at variance analysis. What was planned to be accomplished versus what did we actually do? Maybe it was a lot more, maybe it was a lot less, and either way, it was still acceptable. So now we got to define some methods to improve future performance. So that way we always do what we plan. Maybe we plan to do too much or too little. So we'll analyze the data and we'll close the project. So which of the following is not an objective of the closed project or phase?
B.
Okay. When do we do B, by the way, Dana? Where do we get customer approval?
When we validate the scope process.
And when does that happen? What process group?
Planning, sure.
Oh.
Stealing my thunder, Ryan. Stealing my thunder.
Sorry then.
Monitoring, controlling.
Monitor control, yeah.
Get it. Okay.
Oh yeah, I see it.
How about C? Obtain. Wait. Accept. Okay. Not an objective. Transfer the finish. Obtain customer approval. Okay. Sorry. Obtain verification that from the customer that they accept the project deliverables. Yeah, that is validate scope. This threw me off because normally when you see the word verification from PMI, what do you expect them to be talking about?
Deliverables.
What about the deliverables? When we verify deliverable, what do we do?
Accepted deliverables.
Acceptance.
So that's validation. Validation equals acceptance.
Validate.
Verification equals what?
Test.
Testing and inspecting. So when we obtain verification, usually we're going through quality control. Okay. But in this case, the way it's worded, verification. So the actual exam would have said validation. It would use the word validation from the customer, right? Because it's standardized, they'll have to use the right term, all the way through. Just know that we verify, customers validate. Of the 4 data analysis techniques used in the closed project or phase, which technique is focused on identifying lessons learned?
A.
To complete the closed project or phase process, the customer must formally confirm that the final deliverables are transferred. Which process do they accept deliverables? Oh, you guys got this already. Well, what's the answer here?
B.
B, validate scope, good. And then Sarah instructed John that a critical output of the closed project process was the completion and archive of the lessons learned register. Why is ensuring that the register is updated and archived important?
B.
B.
Okay, good. Let's take a look. That's right. Document analysis. Validate scope, and yes, B. John and Maggie, you no longer have to memorize the closing procedure. If you remember, there was the 8 steps that it was take your last deliverable and then get a customer satisfaction feedback, then do lesson learned, then complete the final report, then close out contracts, then archive your documents, then release the team. Those were the 8 steps. I don't remember them anymore. I don't even know why I rattled them off. Anyways, that's it. Done. 49 processes. I want to do this real quick. I want to take you on a story. This slide. I'm going to take you on a story. Indulge me for 10 minutes. I'm going to take you through from beginning to end and what looks like a PMI journey. So a sponsor comes to me and says, I have a goal and here's the high level scope, schedule, budget, and risk. And so I sit down with the sponsor and I gather other key stakeholders and I facilitate the development of a charter that outlines what the business case is. We looked at, what the market forces were, what they were really trying to achieve. We looked at the organization's strategic plan. We took those into account. We identified the high level scope, schedule, budget, and risk. We determined what my authority level was as a project manager, and we developed a charter. And we said, okay, great. Now I know what your goals are. I know what my level of authority is. Let me go find everyone whose interests are positively or negatively impacted by this project. And so I go and I sit down maybe with the sponsor and other key stakeholders. I look at any contracts that exist. I look at the project itself, and I try to find all those folks and identify all those folks who are going to be impacted. And then I analyze them. I say, what's their level of power? What's their level of interest? Are they for or against? I might use the salience model, the Venn diagram. Do they have a sense of power, a sense of urgency, and a sense of legitimacy? And I'll find that definitive stakeholder somewhere in the middle. And I'll put that information on a stakeholder register, a living, breathing document that I'll update and refer to continually throughout the project. And I say, okay, great. And I'll get to planning. And I'll develop a project management plan. Now, maybe I have a template that already exists, and it already has a scope management plan and a schedule and a cost and a quality. Maybe it already has that, but maybe it doesn't. So I go to my project management plan and I create the skeleton, but I know I'm not done until I've completed all of these. So I go back, I go to my stakeholder register, and I go and I start to collect requirements from all the people. I collect project requirements, solution requirements, stakeholder requirements, design requirements. I collect all these different types of requirements and I put them in my requirements documentation. That's the output. I also create a traceability matrix at the same time that says this requirement goes back to this owner or source. This requirement ties back to this business value. This requirement goes back to this test or acceptance criteria. And now that I got that, I'm going to take all these requirements and now I'm going to determine which ones I'm going to meet, which ones I'm not going to meet. And I'm going to create this document that's very detailed, that when you read it, if you were to close your eyes when you were done, you could see everything that we were doing or that was in scope. You could see everything that we weren't going to do or was out of scope. You could see how we intended to create it. So if the scope of room was to paint the walls, we're either going to brush it or spray it or roll it. And then you could see how someone was going to get sign off. They're going to walk in and they're going to rub their hands along the wall and say, okay, yes, this is in fact semi-gloss or satin or flat paint. And that's my scope statement. Very detailed document. What's in scope, what's out of scope, how we're doing the work, how we're getting it signed off on. And then I'm going to take that document and I'm going to break it down into a picture because a picture says 1,000 words. So I'm going to take that very detailed document that says everything that we're doing, and I'm going to take that portion and I'm going to break it down into deliverables. I'm going to start from the top and I'm going to try my best not to use any verbs. I'm going to break it down all the way till I can't use nouns anymore and I've got to use verbs, and I know that I'm at activities, and I'm going to come back up and my lowest level will be my work packages. I'm going to break this scope down into work packages. And I'm going to apply a numbering scheme. And that will be my code of accounts, right? And if I want to deep dive into scope, schedule, budget, I'm going to apply a control account. Okay, so I have my work breakdown structure. And if I take, and I'm also going to create a legend or a document that describes the work breakdown structure, right? It says, you know, what the number of resources, how much it might cost, how long it might take, right? And that's going to be my work breakdown structure dictionary. So if I take this very detailed document, you can read it and it gives me a very good idea. I take the work breakdown structure, which is a picture, and then I take the work breakdown structure dictionary, which is like a legend for the picture. With those three documents gives me a very good idea of what this project is. I now have a baseline. I now have a scope baseline. WBS dictionary scope statement. So I say, okay, great. Let me go look and see if I have a schedule management plan. If I don't, I'll create one. If I do, I'll tweak it to make sure that how I'm going to run this project matches. And then I'm going to go and I'm going to take that WBS. I'm going to further decompose it, PMI term. I'm going to break it down into specific activities. And I'm going to get an activity list when I define those activities. Right? And when I get that activity list, I'm going to define all the attributes of those activities. Which of these activities are leads and lags and their predecessors and successors and dependencies and what's its WBS ID that it rolls up to. I'm going to get all these attributes and I'm going to determine which of those activities represent significant points in times, which would be my milestones. And so great. Now I have my defined activities. And then I'm going to go and I'm going to put them in order. So I sit down with the team and we figure out based on those attributes, which ones comes first, second, etc. And now we have an idea from beginning to end, which projects, which activities are happening. So we put them in order and we get a schedule network diagram. Then I'm going to go and I'm going to estimate how long those activities would take. And in some instances, I'm going to bottom up estimate because I don't know. Really expensive, takes longest, but it's most accurate. In other instances, I'm going to analogously estimate. Well, project was like this. So the other project was like that. So this project will be like this. Really quick, but inaccurate. I might parametrically estimate. I might say, well, it cost me so many dollars per square foot to build. Therefore, this many square feet is going to cost me this much money. Or I might 3-point estimate. I might take an optimistic, pessimistic, most likely, and come up with a simple triangular average. Or I might use a beta distribution and come up with the performance evaluation review technique PERT and use standard deviations and take optimistic plus 4 times most likely plus pessimistic divided by 6. Okay, and I'll get my durations. Okay? And I'll log all those down. Then I go with the team and I say, let's now go and develop the schedule. So we do schedule network analysis and we double check, remember analysis for PMI, and we double check and measure twice. And we do a forward and backwards pass. We take the early start plus the duration, and we figure out the early finishes. We do the forward pass, and we do that all the way through. We get to the end of our activities, and then we figure out the late start and late finishes, and we do the backwards pass. And then we figure out the float by subtracting the late finish from the early finish, or the late start from the early start, and we get the float value. And then I find my chain of activities that has the least amount of float. Normally 0 when I start, but I can have float on my critical path as I'm running the project. But since I'm doing it for the first time, I find the path with 0, and that's my critical path. Then I start thinking about, well, what if I need to optimize my resources? Sometimes I'm going to have to level my resources, but I got to be careful because that might push my schedule out. It does not care about my hard deadline. So if I have a hard deadline at some stops, I'm going to look to smooth out my resources. I'm not going to level them, I'm going to smooth them out. Then I'm going to look at schedule compression techniques and say, okay, well, what if I need to finish my project quicker? And I'm going to think about crashing the schedule. Where do I have opportunities to dump a bunch of resources in? But I'm going to stick to my sequence. So there's no added risk, but it's going to cost me money. And I'm going to look at places where I don't want to spend money, but I want to do activities in parallel, right? Instead of doing it A, B, C, and D, I might do them all at one point. Right? Not going to cost me any more money, but it's going to be risky. So I'll look at that. And then I might do what if analysis. And I just might say, what if we had a different resource or different tool? And when I come up with all these different variations of the schedule, I'm going to put that into my schedule data as an output. I'm going to have the project schedule as an output. I'm going to then take that project schedule that had all this detailed information about start and end dates and floats, and I'm going to make a very high level schedule, and I'm going to get that signed off on by management. And that will become my schedule baseline. Okay, accepted and approved version of my schedule. And I was like, okay, great, I have a schedule. So I'm going to go and I'm going to look at costs. I'm going to say, well, do I have a plan on how I'm going to manage the schedule and what data sources I'm going to use? And if I do, great, I might tweak it. If I don't, I create one. Then I'm going to go and I'm going to estimate costs. I'm going to go back to each of these activities, and based on the resources that we've estimated, I'm going to go and determine how much this activity is going to cost. All right. And I may use some of the same estimating techniques that we did when we estimated the durations. I might parametrically estimate, or bottom up, or analogously estimate, or use 3-pointing estimate, and I'll come up with my cost estimates. Then I'm going to do reserve analysis. So that way I can establish contingency reserves for each of these activities. Now that I'm done, I'm going to go determine a budget. And I'm going to cost aggregate. That's the PMI term. I'm going to aggregate and roll up all of my costs. I'm going to take all my contracts, all my cost estimates, roll them up together, and I'm going to do reserve analysis again and put some more money aside. And that's going to become my cost baseline. I own that. I own that cost baseline, which contains contingency reserves. I do not know how much management reserves the company's going to afford me, so I don't really know what the true project budget is, but I know what my cost baseline is. So I say, okay, great. And then I go on to plan quality management. And I say, okay, well, I've collected requirements from people, and I defined scope. I broke down the work into activities that I sequenced and made a schedule that I planned costs for. Now, how do I ensure that I meet these requirements with consistency? How do I make sure that everything I do, when I test it, it's going to be tested at the highest level? So I think about the metrics that I want to capture. Right? I think about the cost of quality, and I think about my two categories. I think about the cost of conformance, meeting my requirements, and the cost of non-conformance, not meeting my requirements. And so I think about, okay, if I want my products to conform, I can have preventative cost. It's going to cost me money to train my people, document my processes, give them the proper tools, give them time to do it right. And then I say, okay, and I've got to take into account that I'm going to test and inspect and do destructive testing loss. And I'm going to add all those, and I'm actually going to go back and I'm going to update my cost baseline with that money. Then I'm going to go back and I'm going to look at the cost of non-conformance. And I'm going to say, what happens when my products don't conform? What kind of costs does the project incur? So I'm going to look at internal and external failure costs. Internally, we're going to have to rework Remember, we don't redo or fix things, we rework it. Or I'm going to have to scrap my stuff. I don't throw it away. I don't put it in the garbage. I scrap it. Then I think about the external failure cost. What happens if it gets into my customer's hands? And I say, okay, well, I could have liabilities. People could sue me, right? I could be an automobile manufacturer and I have Takata airbags. And now I'm liable for that class action lawsuit, right? Or I may have lost business. People won't buy my cars anymore. They're like, you know what? I'm going to go buy a Hyundai or a Kia. They offer 10-year, 100,000-mile warranty. Or I may have warranty work. I created a product, spent all this money to market it. It got into your hands. You didn't like it. It didn't perform well to my specs. Now I've got to pay money to ship you a new product and pay money for you to put it back in a box, ship it back to some other place, or we spin up a support system where we break it down and rework it or scrap it. So now that I've understand that the cost of conformance, the cost of non-conformance, and I do a cost benefit analysis of my quality, then I go back, I think about the metrics I want to capture, and I now have a plan. I come up with a test plan for quality control. I come up with a process plan for quality assurance, or what we're now calling manage quality. And I say, great, I have a quality management plan. So now that I figured out how to do this with consistency, now I got to go back and I make a plan for how I'm going to acquire resources, human and physical. And I come up with that plan, and then I go and I estimate the resources that I need, and I'll go back and update my cost, my schedule estimates if I didn't already do this process, right? If I didn't already estimate these resources, I'll go back and I'll update cost and schedule performance based on the resources that I estimate. And then I'll go back and I'll say, now I have to communicate with all these people. So I'll come up with a plan on when I push a message out, send it to someone specifically, when I put it up somewhere on SharePoint for people to go and get themselves, when it's going to be interactive. I determine when it's going to be formal or informal, when it will be verbal or written. Okay. And I come up with that communication management plan. What's the level of granularity? What's our cadence? What's our format we're going to send it out? And I come up with that plan. Then I say, okay, now that we figured out our requirements and we got scope and a schedule and a budget and we have quality plans and plans for resources and how to communicate, what are the risks? So we go back and we come up with a plan for how we're going to identify risk, how we're going to qualify and quantify, come up with the how, and then I go back and identify the risk. And I look for risk everywhere. I look for risk in my plans, in my documents, in my contracts. I look for risk in EEFs, look for risk in OPAs, look for risk in people. And I put it all down in another register, another living, breathing document that I'm going to refer to on a daily basis. Then I go to those risks and I say, okay, what's the probability that this risk will occur? What's the impact and what's the impact it would have? And I come up with a score. Then I go back and I say, let me quantitatively analyze this risk. Now, if this impact happens, what's it going to do to the scope? What's it going to do to the schedule? It might add days. And ultimately, if I add scope or if I add time to my project, what's it going to do to the budget? So the exam's only going to test you on the budget, by the way. So I come up with my quantitative risk analysis, and this time the impact is a dollar amount, and I determine how much this risk is going to cost me if the risk event does in fact happen. And I note that. And I might do straight line EMV, probability times the dollar amount for impact. So I multiply that percentage by the dollar amount, get a final amount, add them all up, and that's my expected monetary value. Or I may use a decision tree. And I may say, okay, I have case 1 and case 2. They both have scenario A and B for case 1, scenario A and B for case 2. For scenario A, I'm going to subtract out my cost, multiply it by a percentage, get a number. For scenario B, subtract out my cost, multiply a percentage, get a number. Add the two numbers together. I now know what case 1 is. I'm going to go to case 2, rinse and repeat. Scenario A and B. Scenario A, subtract out cost, multiply by a percentage, get a number. Scenario B for case 2, subtract out cost, multiply by a percentage, get a number, add the two together. And then I'm going to pick the higher of case 1 or case 2. I may use sensitivity analysis to look at these risks, right? Quantitatively. And I might put the results of that in a tornado diagram and figure out which objectives are most sensitive to a particular constraint. The constraint, triple constraints being time, cost, and scope. In this case, for risk, just time and cost, okay? Then I say, okay, great. Now that I've identified all the risk, I've qualified those risks, I've quantified those risks, let me go and plan responses. So I come up and I figure out that I can avoid, transfer, mitigate threats. I can share, enhance, and exploit opportunities. I can escalate both positive and negative risk. If I accept a positive risk, I can passively accept by just putting it on the watch list. I can actively accept by putting contingency reserves or money aside for it. If I passively accept an opportunity, I can just not pursue it. Or if I actively accept an opportunity, I can put money aside so that we can pursue it later. So now that I have my risk responses, I log those. I determine who my risk owners are going to be because they are responsible for implementing a risk response if the risk event takes place. And then I'm done with risk. And I say, okay, now let me go and figure out how I'm going to buy everything. Because now that I know how to minimize risk, now let's go make purchases. So I first look at contract types and I say, cost reimbursable contracts are risky to me as the buyer. Time and material contracts are risky to me as a buyer. Therefore, I want to use fixed price contracts. And I remember that we use contract types to shift risk on a project, okay? So I'll look at those contract types. I'll think about source selection criteria. How are we going to choose the right vendor? I look at, I come up with procurement documentation. I'll develop RFPs for work that we need help with. RFIs, RFQs, IFBs, invitation for bid, request for quote. All right, we'll look at all these things. We'll use make or buy analysis to determine if we should do it in-house or outsource it, and we'll get make or buy decisions. And we'll have a procurement plan for how we're going to buy stuff. And then we'll plan on stakeholder engagement. We'll go back and say, now that we've determined what new contract types we're going to have, which develops some new stakeholders. Now that we've identified some risk and assigned risk owners, which may have identified some new stakeholders, right? All of this stuff that we've been doing here, planning resources, etc., we may have identified more stakeholders. Now that we've identified all these stakeholders, we've analyzed these stakeholders. Now let's plan on how to keep them engaged at the right level throughout the life cycle of the project. And so we'll come up with a plan for that. And we'll say, okay, great, we have a plan. Let's go execute the plan. So we'll direct and manage the team according to the plan. And we'll collect their data and they'll produce deliverables. Okay? And while that's happening, we'll manage project knowledge. Any explicit knowledge, we'll document it. Tacit knowledge, we'll have conversations and then we'll document it. Okay. We'll perform quality assurance. We'll make sure that everybody is following the right processes, right? That Chris and Dana are both using analog or digital gauges, and that somebody's not saying 90 seconds and somebody's not saying a minute and a half. So we'll manage that quality, right? We'll do quality assurance and make sure everybody's following the right processes, using the right tools, reporting out on the right metrics. While we're executing, we'll also look to acquire any additional folks who weren't available to us during planning but are needed. So we'll acquire those folks. And then we'll develop the team. Maybe we'll have a kickoff. We'll talk about team rules and ground rules and how we're going to respect each other's ideas. And we'll talk about training. And maybe we'll do some team building exercises. We'll set up a schedule for when we recognize and reward people. We'll do all of that when we develop the team. And as we're running the project, I'll also work with individuals. I'll manage any conflicts they have. I'll smooth things over when it's appropriate. I'll force it when I need to. I'll get people to compromise or to collaborate, I'll also think about, let me back it up. While I'm working with a team, before I get to the individuals and with conflicts, so I'm working with a team, I'll think about the stages of team development, the forming, storming, norming, performing. I'll think about that in a journey. Right. I'll think about, we mentioned training, we mentioned team building exercises. So I'll think about all those when we're developing the team, and then we manage a team. I'll think about conflict resolution techniques when I'm working with individuals. Remember, this is the team, this is individuals. So I'll think about conflict resolution techniques like forcing and smoothing and collaborating. I'll think about motivational techniques, the hygiene theory where, fringe benefits only keep you from being upset. The expectancy theory, you're only going to do something because you expect some reward, right? Theory X and theory Y, people need to be watched, or you know what, do your work. I'll think about all those things, and I'll work with individuals on my project, right? And I'll do performance appraisals when I work with individuals and to manage those folks, and I'll get team performance assessments when I'm working with the team. Then I'll manage communications. I'll just start distributing information. Team members are doing work, they're creating deliverables. Then I'll distribute information that says, here's status, here's a project performance review, et cetera, et cetera. Any risk responses that need to be implemented, I'll put them out, right? We gotta put our sandbags out, put those out. We'll start buying stuff. We'll take those procurement documents. We'll look to get proposals or responses back from folks. We'll evaluate those proposals. You'll see the tool and technique, the proposal evaluation review technique. And then we'll choose a seller. We'll negotiate with that seller and we'll award a contract. Or if we can't negotiate with them, we'll move on to the next and we'll award a contract. And so that's what we'll do, and we'll conduct procurements, and then we'll manage the level of engagement that stakeholders have. We'll make sure that they're doing the right things. Now, while all that is happening, the entire time I was monitoring, controlling project work. What I was doing was I was making sure that any changes that I first looked to avoid the change. If I couldn't, I identified exactly what that change needed to be. I evaluated what the impacts were going to be in terms of scope, schedule, budget, or risk. And then I issued a change request. If they approved the change request, I got that CCB approval. I updated my documents, right? Step 5. I now go to the team and get buy-in, step 6, step 6. Step 7 is go to the team and get buy-in. And then step 8 was now direct and manage the team according to the new plan. So I'll follow my change control procedures. If I get any deliverables that have been tested and inspected and verified via quality control, I'll go and I'll get them validated. And while the project is running, I'll look to control scope, schedule, and cost using earned value management. I'll control scope, make sure that the magnitude and degree of variation is controlled, make sure that we don't have any scope creep by doing perform integrated change control, make sure that I avoid gold plating. I forgot if I mentioned this to you. Gold plating is internally driven scope creep, where team members add features and functionalities without the request of the buyer or the customer. So we avoid scope creep in those two ways. We'll manage the schedule, keep the schedule tight by looking at schedule compression techniques and resource allocation techniques. And then we'll control costs as well. We might use earned value management to do it. And we'll think about the 3 formulas that we'll get. Budget at completion divided by CPI. If your cost variances are typical, right? You'll take the budget at completion minus your earned value, add it to your actual cost if the work is expected to continue. Right? We'll look at those formulas and we'll do earned value analysis, or we'll do trend analysis or regression analysis. We'll do any of those things. When we control quality, we'll test and inspect. We might use a control chart. We might use a check sheet. We might use fishbone diagrams, flow charts. We'll do all of that to test and inspect our deliverables, make sure that they are meeting the requirements with consistency. Okay? We will control the resources that we have. This could be the materials or supplies that need to be delivered, the physical building that we might be in, but we'll make sure that the resources are controlled, that they're appearing when they're supposed to appear, and we'll monitor our communications. Make sure that folks are getting the right information at the right time, in the right level of granularity, in the right format. We'll monitor our risk, make sure the implemented risk responses are working. If not, we'll go back and make changes. We'll control procurements, all right? We'll inspect our vendors' work, and we'll audit ourselves internally to make sure that we're buying things in the best manner. And then we'll monitor the level of engagement that stakeholders are, right? We'll make sure that, if they're unaware, that we make them aware. If they're resistant, we get them to be a leading stakeholder. And when we're done with the project and we've accepted the final deliverable, we'll go and we'll close the project out. We'll take all of our documents, we'll take all of the accepted deliverables, we'll conduct a lessons learned with the team, we'll get a stakeholder satisfaction survey completed from our customer, and then we'll create a project performance report that will turn into management. We'll close out any procurements that are left. We'll archive our documents. Then I'll release the team because you need the team to do all that. Then I will close the project. And that is the journey of PMI, a very sequential, linear project design of going through from the very beginning and following this waterfall. Come here and do this, then do that, then do that, right? So that is the idea from PMI. Pregnant pause as I'm waiting. All right.
I have a question for you. And it kind of bothered me, I think, when we first went through it, but the contingency planning that we really in, I guess, process 6, right? And well, we identify the risk, but we actually, at least when you went through the story again, and I had that same impression when we were going through the material in detail, we start planning for contingencies with the scope, schedule, and cost management. But you don't really know what the risks are. We haven't really gone through the risk assessment piece yet to be able to really quantify that.
Great point.
Having trouble reconciling.
So let's reconcile that. Okay. First, do we all agree that even though this is a very linear sequential design, that we live in multiple process groups? Right? We jump back and forth all the time. Okay? So that's the first piece. So now that you got that, recognize this. Whenever you're within a process group, when we're in planning, we're planning. We're doing all of these. Now, it's been presented to you in order, but I'll submit this. If you are in my experience, when I do construction projects, one of the first things that we look at is risk. Okay? So if we get into planning first, before we look at scope, we kind of understand the scope schedule, but the first thing we do is risk. Safety planning, risk planning, right? When I do IT projects, the first thing that they look at, requirements. They don't worry about cost, not worried about schedule, we're not worried about quality. What are your requirements first? And then I'll do everything after that. And when I've worked in the healthcare industry, or one company that, had some projects with medical devices, and another one that, the two quality projects, another one where they were doing the oil rig abatements. The first thing that they looked at was quality. But quality to them was meeting requirements with consistency for the regulatory agencies, the EEFs that they'd have to go through. That's the first thing. Okay, what are these requirements that we're gonna definitely have to meet all the time? They look at those first and let that be the guide. So I'm giving you this to help you understand that you don't need to start here and work your way down. You could have certainly, in fact, when I'm running a project in my personal way, after I initiate it, the very first thing I do, I go and I plan stakeholder engagement. Now that I've identified these people, this is the first thing that I'm going to do, because I need to figure this out because they're going to help me do all this. And then you could start with risk and then go into cost, or you could get all these contingencies in your schedule durations and in your cost estimates. And then when you go here, you simply go back and update your numbers. So when you're in planning, you're in planning. Yes, we've presented the material to you in order as the PMBOK from chapter 4 all the way down to chapter 13. However, the only thing is that, let's say if you start with schedule, you have to at least define activities and then sequence them and estimate durations, but you have to follow that. Or if, let's say if you're in risk, you can't plan a risk response if you haven't identified them yet, vice versa, right? So other than that, when you're in a process group, you can start with any knowledge area you want.
Okay.
And again, we might develop 40% of the plan, start executing on that plan. We're monitoring, controlling. So we're doing all of these processes, even though we didn't talk about them until now. From the moment that the charter signed and you have an approved project that is now burning money for you, burning money for other people to do planning. From the moment that happens, you're monitoring, controlling. So all of these processes are happening. All of these processes are happening, and they'll continue to happen even after you've validated scope, the last deliverable. You'll continue to do all of this until you've closed the project.
Okay.
So that's a very common one, Ryan, that, you know, so I hope that helps. Does that help everyone? Okay. Anything else? All right. Are you guys ready? How do you feel? This is like the moment of truth now, right? So what do we have? We're about 3 hours in, which means we got 5 hours left. So what I'd like to do, so that way I can get time with you guys at the end of the day today, but we'll leave it up to a vote. Maybe we can do it one way, because I've got to just give you the full 4 hours. I don't know who's going to take 2.5 and who's going to take 4. So 4 hours, and then you need time to review your exam. So we've got 5 hours right now. You could take a quick break, 5-10 minute break, and then you could start your 4-hour exam, and then you could spend 20-30 minutes to review, and I'll have 20-30 minutes with you at the end of the day today to go over that. Or we could do a little bit of review right now of any special topics. We got another hour. And then you take the 4 hours of the second half of the day to take your exam. And then tomorrow, when we reconvene, we'll start with the review then, instead of breaking it up, doing like 20 minutes of review today and 20 minutes of review tomorrow.
I'd rather get to the test myself.
Okay.
I'd rather do option 2.
There's a little bit of study, okay?
Well,
Dana, you're the wild card?
so can't we just mix them and give the rest of the day to do the test and get that done, but then just review tomorrow instead of trying to get everybody back together at the end of the day today?
Yeah, I think we can do that.
Wasn't that the original plan?
Yeah, I think that works. So we can just get right to the test then. So before we do that then, let's look at, are there any special topics or any individual processes that anybody wants to touch on or have questions on? Or
I'm gonna be honest, I just need to sit down and study more. So this is gonna be my wing it, learn how to do the test, learn the timing, and then we'll go through it tomorrow, and it's gonna be really awesome for all of us to see all the ones I missed. But I mean, I don't have questions right now until I can sit down and really dive in and really study.
that's very fair. That's exactly how it happened. You
I'm
don't
in the
know.
same boat. Yeah.
So today's exam, in your materials, you have the guide. What else do you have? I'm not sure what you all have received. Do you have like a laminate sheet that has the processes or anything like that?
I just printed them out
Just
here.
made one.
You made one. Oh, beautiful. Oh my gosh. I'm like a proud papa over here. You guys made one. Okay. All right. So for today, here's what you get for this exam, because the understanding is that when you take the real exam, you're going to memorize this. So today, what I want you all to use, and this is it, the only notes that you can get, you can take that process map. That's the one thing you can use. The second thing you can use is if you have a formula sheet. Does a formula sheet exist anywhere in the materials that you have? I don't have I only have the electronic copy. So you have it, John. John, where did those formulas come from? Are they on a page in the PM Master Prep?
They're from mnemonics I've memorized. So this notebook is just full of my day-over-day dump. So I've been practicing my dumps for like a month.
Okay. So the formulas that you all will need are going to really right now, it's just going to be the earned value management formulas. So what you can do is you can go to that section and you can just like write them down, you know, make what we call a brain dump. And here's what a brain dump will look like. And let me quick brain dump. So it will look something like this. I would have all of my processes, right? Develop charter, identify stakeholders, draw a line, and project management plan, draw a line, direct and manage project team. I'm gonna draw one for you guys so you see manage knowledge, ... draw a line. Then you go to monitor and control, perform integrated change control, ... draw a line, and then close project. And then on this side, you would have all of your formulas that would have like budget at completion divided by CPI, present value equals future
Are you
value.
drawing this somewhere that we should be able to see?
Say it again. Yeah,
Are you drawing this on the?
I'm drawing. I'm going to put it up on the screen.
Oh, okay. Just making sure I wasn't supposed to be seeing something.
So it should look something, excuse my really fast chicken scratch, but so when you take, I'm going to go more in depth in the Prometric, but when you take the Prometric exam, they're going to give you 2 sheets of scratch paper, right? And in these 2 sheets of scratch paper, you have front and back. You're going to take one side of it, so that way you have the front and back of another sheet and the back of this sheet, because that's all you got left, okay? You're going to draw a line down the middle, okay? And then on one side, you're going to write all of your processes, but you don't need to make a matrix. Just do it in line. Develop charter, identify stakeholders, draw a line. Develop project management plan, plan scope management, collect requirements, define scope, break down the work, plan time management, define activities, sequence activities, schedule, right? Estimate the duration, develop your schedule, so on and so forth, draw a line. So you get to monitor and control, perform integrated change control, all the way down to control stakeholder engagement, draw a line, and then close project. Now you have one column of all of your processes. The other column, you're going to write down all the formulas that you can remember. Budget at completion divided by CPI, your present value, all of that. You're going to write it down. And now this becomes your brain dump. You need to practice this over the course of the next 15 days or so, however long before you take your exam. Because when you take the real exam, you're going to start your exam. In the first 10 minutes, you're not even going to answer a question. You're going to spend 10 minutes producing this from your head. And then this becomes your cheat sheet, because when you get to question 160 and you're 3 hours in, you're not going to remember these formulas. Your eyes are going to be burning. Your head's going to be hurting. So this becomes your cheat sheet. So today for the exam, if you have the matrix on one sheet, that's fine. Use that. And then go find the earned value management formulas, or write down as many formulas as you think you're going to need for this. And it's honor system, right? But I want you to have the formulas, and I want you to have the processes, and then you're going to use that to take the exam today. Okay? I need to call Scott real quick and make sure. I believe all of your questions, everybody on the call today should have access, including Maggie and John, access to the same exam. It's a static exam so that you all will take it individually, of course, but it'll be in the same order. You're going to get the exact same questions in the same order. That way, when we go over it, so what happens is when they have classes that are large, we'll do it this way, and then everybody will miss like 14, right? Or everybody will get 122 right, but they didn't like it, right? Something like that, or what's the trick? And so that's how, we'll be able to go through this exam and really give you the question theory and test taking strategies. So get your formulas, get your processes, right? Set a 4-hour timer. Make sure that you're taking a break every 75 questions or 75 minutes, all right? Today is not a day for you to worry about your score. Today's score will not be an indicator of whether or not you will pass the exam, because number one, you haven't memorized any formulas or processes yet. You're going to be guessing on some of this, right? Today is an indicator of where your mental stamina lies, okay? Somewhere between question 80 and 120, your mental stamina is going to go out the door. You're going to begin by you're going to take 10 questions and you're going to get 6 or 7 right, 3 or 4 wrong. 6 or 7 right, 3 or 4 wrong. And somewhere between question 80 and 120, depends on each of you are different, your mental stamina will go out the drain, and every 10 questions, you're going to get 6 or 7 wrong, 3 or 4 right. 6 or 7 wrong, 3 or 4 right. So today, when you're done with this exam, when we look at it tomorrow, I'll give you specific instructions, but the goal is for you to see, where did I go wrong? Like where did my mental stamina drop? And now your goal is to pick that up. Each practice, can I push that forward 10 questions? Can I go from question 80 to question 100, 100 to 120, 120 to 140, to where my mental stamina stays up the whole time? That's what your practice, that's what this practice is for. So I'm going to relate this to professional sports again, all right? This boot camp is like the preseason, okay? This is the preseason where we've come together, we've got our free agents, we've formed our team, right? And now we're practicing. The regular season is post this boot camp. That is where you all are reading your PMBOK, you're reading your binder during the week, you're taking practice exams on the weekends, okay? The playoffs get to the point where I can memorize this, all right? Now I'm timing myself now, and I'm writing down my processes, my formulas, and I can do it within 10 to 15 minutes, right? Because when you get to that point where you've memorized all the processes and formulas, you're good to go. And then the point where you can actually recall them all, because memorizing and recalling are two different things, right? So once you're able to recall them all, like you're at that point, likely you've already taken 5 or 6 practice exams. You're ready for the test. You're ready for the championship game. And there's no way that you can go into a championship game if you haven't had practice sitting down for 4 hours and understanding your body. When do I need to take a break? When do I break down? If you haven't had 6 opportunities to go through this exam and say, oh, these are how the questions are presented. This is why I keep picking the wrong one. I'm eliminating the right 2 first. When I get to that 50-50, here's where I'm going wrong. You need practice with that. So that's what these exams are for. It's less about the score. I mean, when you get to the end, the 6th or the 7th one, yes, you want to be breaking 85. But today and the next 2 to 3 that you take, it's about the experience. Understand yourself and where you're going through, because that's most important. And that's what we tend to just throw that out the window when we study for these things. But that's important. Ask yourself this. When's the last time you sat down and took a 200 question exam? Years, right? Since college. When's the last time you sat down for 4 hours uninterrupted? Right? You need practice with that. You need practice just sitting and then staring at a screen for 4 hours. You need practice with that too. So it's going to take 6 or 7 practice exams for you to get there. Today is a day for you to just experience, right? So I'm not going to try to give you a whole lot of instruction. I want you to experience the exam. We're going to talk about it tomorrow when we go over it. We're going to go over all the questions in depth, but that's what your goal is today. All right. So I really want to level set with you guys where you're at. I've got 9 minutes after 8. So I'd like you to take, well, that would be 11 for you all. I'd like you to take your exam either at noon or at 1, whatever 4 hours works for you guys, right? We're supposed to go until noon today, or 1 today, my time, which would be what? 4 o'clock your time today. So it doesn't matter when you take your exam today. You just need 4 hours of uninterrupted concentration time. So go to your family members, your friends, ask them to give you help. Right? And I'll mention this again, but since it's coming to my head, I'm going to say this to you now. When you're asking your family members and friends for help, don't tell them, hey, for the next month, I just need help. I'm going to need to offload, chores and stuff on you, because that's a long time. A month is a long time. Rather than say this, hey, there's 52 weeks in a year. I just need 2 or 3. And then people are like, okay, I got you for the next 2-3 weeks. All right. But if you tell somebody I need a month, that's just like, right. So be very, very, tactful about how you explain your need for help. So anyways, I'll come back to that. We're going to end now. Take a break. At the very least, give me 20 minutes to confirm with Scott that they have actually isolated a question set for you guys on the portal. And then once that comes, I'll have them shoot out an email to everybody. So you got that confirmation email. And at that point, you'll take your exam today, 4 hours to do it. Make a note when you finish. Jot down your start time, jot down your finish time. If you're taking breaks, make a note of how many breaks you took, right? And I want to talk about all that tomorrow. So I'm more concerned with the operations of the exam, and I'm less concerned with your score. Right? That's the stuff I want to talk to you about tomorrow.
So CJ, you're going to email us the link to the exam?
Yes, I'm going to either from me or from Scott, right? Because this is not a common practice for Scott, but like as 2 vendors, we're sharing best practices with each other. And so my best practice is that everybody takes the same exam. So I've asked him to lock this down for you all. So I want to confirm that's there so that you all take the same exam with the same questions.
CJ, there is an exam in our portal that's called the PMP static exam. That's 200 questions. And then there's one, a random one. So I'm thinking that's probably it.
That's it. They got it done. All right. So yeah, they had to do some work on the back end of their portal to get this ready for you guys. So make sure you say a big thank you to Scott and Mike, because a little bit of coding went into this for you guys. So yeah, it'll be the static ones. So then I don't need to confirm, it's done. That's it. Okay, so no email for
Okay.
me. You're just going to take your exam when you're ready. It's going to be that static one. Everybody, please take the static one. Maggie and John, do you guys intend to participate in this exercise?
Yep.
Yeah, I was.
Yeah. So take a full length practice exam today. Maybe that wasn't your goal on a Saturday, but hey, you know what this credential means. So go get it is the best way I can say it. Anything else? Okay. So good luck. All right.
Good luck, guys.
It's an experience. Don't worry about your scores. Experience the exam. Like, really process everything. Open it. My actual sport is baseball. I'm an old baseball player, and my coach used to have this term called dime focus. He used to say, you walk around every day and your focus is like the size of a quarter. I need you to dial that into the size of a dime. And when you do that, now you start taking in more information about, stuff that it's all of a sudden like your peripheral vision, everything, gets heightened. So heighten your senses when you do this. Heighten your senses when you do this, right? Make sure you have some water, a piece of fruit, something sugary, berries, strawberries, apple, don't eat a salami sandwich, right? Doing this, right? Big, all right, you want some sugar, but no fake sugar, some fruit or something.